G'day, freedom lovers. It's Friday night again, and I'm here with another awesome guest. Today, we're going to go into election mode because it's all happening. We've got council elections happening, and obviously state elections are coming up soon. So we're going to see a lot more of this kind of activity. And this is the opportunity for the community to get in and have a chat with people. Today, we're going to talk to Troy Thompson, a man who, with full disclosure, I have worked with before on a few different projects. The first time we met was discussing his candidacy for One Nation, which led to a very interesting cartoon that we created, which led to the cartoons for One Nation that we all see today. So before we get started, I thought it'd be a really great place to start to help people understand voting, because I learned a lot through this. Troy must have explained it about 5 or 6 different ways before the penny drops. I get it now, and I knew how to put this together. So we're going to start with a quick little 2-minute cartoon that shows you where the One Nation cartoons actually started.
What is preference voting? When voting, it is important to remember you own your own preferences, not political parties. Where possible, take a black pen for polling day. Place a 1 in the box beside your most preferred candidate. This process should be completed for your second, third and fourth preferences until all boxes are numbered in order of your preferences. The person who receives your final preference should be the person you least want to win. Remember, do not make any other mark on your ballot paper or your vote will likely not be counted. Counting a preference vote. The first step is checking each vote is formal by ensuring all the boxes are properly numbered on the ballot paper. Polling officials will then count first preferences by looking for the number 1 next to a candidate's name and allocating the vote to that candidate. Next, the candidate with the lowest number of first preferences is eliminated from the count. The second preferences of the eliminated candidate are distributed to the remaining candidates. Now the next candidate with the lowest number of votes is eliminated and their second preferences are distributed. This process of elimination continues until just 2 candidates remain. The winner is declared based on who has the majority of votes. Once the result is clear, the Commission declares the successful candidate. It is incredibly important to ensure One Nation gets your first preference vote and gains balance of power. This will deliver real outcomes for Queensland that other parties have previously failed to achieve. Vote One Nation, because you matter.
So that's where it all started. It was an interesting day back in 2020 when I came across Troy, and I offered my services and he asked, hey, can you do these things? And coincidentally, I had just looked it up the night before. It's just one of those strange twists of fate. It was obviously meant to be. And he said, hey, mate, can you do this? I'm like, I reckon I can. And a few weeks later, that was kind of what we were putting out. But anyway, enough about me and what we did there. Let's introduce our guest today. G'day, Troy. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm very good, man, and it's good to be working with you in a different capacity this time.
It's always good being interviewed by somebody that you're comfortable with. So
That's it. I think it's important that full disclosure is given in the nature of this, that we have worked together. And I think it's a good place to start too. Obviously, they're probably going to throw a few eggs at you. Oh, look at him. He's One Nation. He's a redneck racist and all those kind of things that we get from, certain people within the community. Tell us a little bit about what transpired there with the One Nation camp, man.
Oh, look, I have no ill feeling, and I certainly have no reservations about putting my foot forward to become a candidate. And very early on the piece, I obviously spoke to Pauline Hanson, and it was actually a federal member who said maybe you should look at another party to go through this process. So I then approached Pauline. We had a discussion and we agreed in principle that I could run for the party on the grounds that I could use myself. within what we did. So we went down that path, and we gained a lot of momentum quickly. And I think it's got a lot to do with that. Let's just be honest and always confront the issue, answer the question, don't avoid anything. I probably am a little bit too blunt, quite often being told you're too bluntly honest, because if you're like that, people aren't going to always, be accepting of you as a person. They like that political speak. I never believe that. I think people like honesty, and there's enough dishonesty in politics to know who's lying and who's not. So the journey of One Nation was over 6 months, if you like. Towards the end, about 6 weeks out, some information came to light with Pauline, and it was around. It didn't actually come to light. She was aware of it, but she was concerned. And the first one was, and this is something that I've brought up with people already when I'm going through this mayoral candidacy, was you change your name. You must be a criminal if you change your name. And I said, well, no, not at all. In 1996, was quite a bit of time ago, I changed my name because I had a German wife who was the last in her line. So I hyphenated my name. To me, that's all I had to say.
It's equal opportunity, isn't it? That's what women have been fighting for. Like, I don't understand how that's a bad thing.
Yeah. So there was that, and then that was the first thing Pauline brought up, or James Ashby brought up, I should say. And then it was when I came back to Australia. So I lived in Germany for 6 years, running an IT and supply chain, and worked for Department of Homeland Security and a few other bits and pieces along the journey in Germany. And I'd come back and I took a job on as a CEO of a global supply chain management and people management company. And that company, when I came in, had $14 million of debt. I took it down to $4 million of debt, and the owners decided to close it up, put it into administration. As it was, they end up selling it for credits, tax credits. So everything worked out well. But at the time when I spoke to Pauline, it was just Pauline and I. It was very genuine. She said to me, look, I'm concerned that the opposition, mainly the red hats, she would call them, Labor, would come at you and they would try and use that as leverage. And if you were successful, they'd try and come after you for that money. Because when you become a CEO of a company, you become an officer of the company. And in that, you take ownership of everything that goes on in the company as much as a director. But
so even the events that have happened before you took the CEO position, you're still accountable for that?
Well, at the time I was. No, so it's expired now because everything has an expiry date. Right. And that was in 2015. So it's well past due now. But the concern in 2020 was it was 5 years. So it was just on that borderline. But Pauline had basically said, that concerns me that potentially there's a risk for somebody to sue you for that amount of money. But I wasn't a shareholder. I wasn't a director. I was made an office holder so I could sign off on company documents. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. When you become a CEO or an executive, you become an office holder of the company. Things change. Ownership change.
I had no idea.
And so that was the risk that Pauline perceived to be a real risk. And I said, you know what, Pauline, why don't I stand out in front of the crowd and say, I'm not worried about it. I'll tell you the truth. I took a company from $14 million of debt down to $4 million. Yes, there was a minor risk, but the risk would be a non-event because I'm not a director and I'm not a shareholder, which means there's no owner. I get nothing out of being an office holder other than the CEO of a company. So anyway, at that point, Pauline said, so look, this is my concern. We're going to offer you to withdraw you from the party, or we will have to look at disendorsement. And I said, look, I'll withdraw. You've given me no choice, but I will withdraw. And that's where we got to. So now in the papers, in the bulletin, they're disendorse One Nation person, name change, company goes insolvency, all these things. It's like, really? Why don't we tell the truth? I changed
So,
my name in 96, not in 2020.
yeah. And I'm assuming we're talking about the Townsville Bulletin because it's pretty much the only newspaper
Well,
in town, but we'll get to that idea
yeah,
a little bit further down the track.
yeah.
Have they approached you, in your opinion, in fairness, to get your side of the story?
Not at all. So I had the one of their journalists ring me and talk to me, and it was interesting because here I am, independent. I don't belong to a party, and I haven't since 2020. And
Yeah.
I believe in a local election, you must be independent, because if you're Labor, like Team Jenny Hill, you have tunnel vision. You talk about one party, your policies, your procedures. If you're Liberal, you talk about your policies, your procedures. So by being an independent person, you have the ability to say, okay, I'll talk to you and we'll take on some of what you're saying, and I'll talk to you and I'll take on. But in the end, as an independent, I'll go be guided by my community, not by left, right. I'll be guided by the people in the community, because there's more of them and they're the ones who vote, not a party political journey. So the Bulletin, when they asked the question, first thing I got a phone call was, "Oh, you're the One Nation guy we want to talk about." And I went, "Really? We're gonna bring up that old chestnut?"
Yeah.
And then when we had the interview, he started pushing, "Oh yeah, but you were disendorsed." No, that's what you reported it as. Were you at the table with Pauline, James Ashby, myself, and my mother? He said, no, but that's what we were told. And I said, no, you weren't. You weren't told that at all. So they printed that in when they did the story, said loosely that I was a almost One Nation candidate.
Yeah.
And that I was disendorsed. So that was the first untruth. And then they tried to bind the name change and disendorsement like they were together, that I changed my name because it was an insolvency thing. But I changed my name in 96. And then when I got my divorce, I went back in 2006 as Troy Thompson. So the company that I worked for was in 2015. But they had binded the story in such a way that they try and make you seem bad, because they don't want positive people in the industry. You know, you can't be too honest, because you wouldn't make a good politician.
And people wonder why people have lost faith in the mainstream media. And, you know, again, as you know, and, you know, everybody on the channel has probably heard me say many a time, I've worked within the mainstream media, and particularly here in Townsville, and I believe most rural regions are acting in a similar capacity. It's a revolving door. So I wouldn't mind betting that the reporter who spoke to you regarding this is just going through the archives, has, you know, maybe been with the paper for a year at best, possibly two, and is literally relying on this newspaper tells the truth, and this is their archive is it's like the only library in town. It's the only information. They're probably underpaid, overworked, understaffed, which is the standard procedure since I first moved here to work for the mainstream. So, I mean, without sort of covering for them, I can see where they're coming from, in the sense that they probably don't have the capacity to do their job properly, which is one of the big problems. But, you know, having confronted a few over the years, they don't seem to have much of a desire to want to do their job properly and just slap happily go through.
Yeah, look, they certainly write what they see in front of them. They don't interview and get to know and take on board what the person standing in front of them or on the phone is telling them. They're scrolling through stories that they've heard or media, and that's what people believe, unfortunately. So what I've gone about creating in this is to demonstrate to people that, you know, it's 4 years. 4 years is a long time. And I'm not a member of a party, and I don't regret my decisions, because that's what makes me who I am now. Because if you don't learn, what's the good of it? You've got to learn from every journey you've been on. And that's, you know, unfortunately, people don't get real these days. They like to create things. And I think the hook that the print media puts out there is exactly that. It's about getting a story and a hook So people come to it and they use that as their story. But the honesty has gone out the window. It just doesn't tell the real story anymore.
Or at the very least, you could call it selective honesty. You know, they've chosen what little pieces they have, and you know, whether purposefully or ignorantly omit important details.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I've had a comment pop up here. If you'd be care to answer, does Pauline Hanson and other pollies have advisors? Don't they make the decisions, e.g., like Joe Biden is running things? What would you say to that?
Look, Pauline Hanson absolutely has advisors. If I say so, Pauline Hanson has advisors. Jenny Hill pays in Townsville for advisors $600,000 to advise her. Yet she's got a CEO who is employed to run the council. He should be her advisor. So you've got to ask the question on the quality and the ethics of your advisors. Now, Pauline's advisor has always been the media man, James Ashby. And so he brings the stories to Pauline and brings the information and drives it in that channel. So they all have advisors. Don't get me wrong. If I'm elected as mayor, I want to go to the community as my advisors because I'm going to be judged by the community for the next election. These days, politicians aren't held accountable. So one of the things that I've brought forward is the old town hall meetings. Every month, I will stand in a different suburb, in a different community centre as mayor and be held accountable for my actions. And when somebody says to me, this is what I want, I'm going to listen. That's the point of difference. They're paying advisors who are professionals in business, but they're not professionals in community. Community are you and I, the people who pay your rent, pay your bills. They know what hurts them. They know what makes them move forward.
That sounds like a great idea. I love it. Like I noticed to drag in the yes/no scenario that I noticed that Labor were very selective about who they would invite to these meetings, and they were done very quickly. And you know, by the time you heard about them, it's like, oh, Struth, I missed that. You know, didn't really make it a big public thing to get the people's opinion. And from what I heard, it was more like they stood there in dictated terms as opposed to asked for the people's perspective on things. And in my experience with Labor way back in the day, helping out people who were trying to get in with unions and whatnot, I noticed there was a specific trend with the Labor Party, and it was very dictatorial. And when you start seeing them promoting ideals such as communism and socialism, and if anybody questions that, I can present the footage to show you. They do promote those kind of concepts. And, in a lot of ways, if you're not on board, you're out the door. And one of the people I worked with, and one of the people I worked with actually called me once upon a time and said, hey, you need to take these Facebook posts down and whatnot. You're posting against the Labor Party. I'm like, freedom of expression, mate. And just because I did a job for you doesn't mean you get to tell me what I can say on Facebook. Oh, mate, you got to understand, Labor Party will go through my feed and they'll find who I'm friends with, and they'll go through your feed. And if you're saying the wrong things, that'll look bad on me. Oh, look, man, you'll get a lot of work through us, just so long as you toe the line, and I was obviously not very comfortable with that, and, haven't exactly done a lot of work with that person ever since as a result. I was absolutely disgusted that kind of thing was happening here in this country, and to see people promoting socialist and communist ideas, particularly seeing we've fought so many wars, and here we are in a military town, so many people have put their lives on the lines to stand against that kind of ideal. I'm very disturbed to see that it's taken such a stronghold. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, I look at it. My dad fought under the flag. He had 14 tours: Vietnam, Borneo, Malay, wars that we didn't know were wars. And he fought under one flag. And he fought with Aboriginal soldiers, British soldiers, American soldiers, Australian soldiers under one flag. I spent some time overseas, and the one thing that I was told by a very important person in Germany was, and of all places, Germany, identification causes racism.
Okay.
So what happened in Germany? They identified a race.
Mm.
Then what happened? So what we've done in Australia is we started this identity politics. We've started to separate people.
Yeah.
And you can't have that. We've all got to be bonded together and move forward together. But we've turned this, I should say, the government in power these days and locally. You look at Jenny Hill, she established a party for local government which should be independent. It should be 10 independent councillors and a mayor. But she set up at the last election a party, and 8 of the 10 councillors are Team Jenny Hill. So which way do you think the vote's going to go every time they don't even have to ask the people? It's always going to go the Labor way.
So we've also got another scenario I was made aware of during the week where we've had I can't remember exactly how many councillors were. I think it's somewhere in the vicinity between 3 and 5 have pretty much just been re-elected under Team Jenny Hill, which is a wonderful way of kind of make a sporting scenario out of what would possibly be considered a socialist construct. Have automatically been re-elected because nobody stood against them.
Yeah, so the last election, that's exactly what happened. Mark Malacino comes to mind. So he's the deputy mayor.
Yeah.
He had no one at all. So they just said, tick, there you go.
Mm.
Now, what we've got right now in local government is on Monday is the last day for people to elect themselves to run for council as a councillor in an electorate. So if you live in Kerwin, you might be the electorate against Kurt Rayburn, who's the Team Jenny Hill one, and that's the electorate 7. So each one has up to 10, got a different electorate, different one. So out of the 10 electorates, 8 of them are Team Jenny Hill. Now, right now, as it stands, on Monday, as I said, is the last day to nominate. Now,
so this Monday coming, so there's still time for people to jump in and give it a go.
Well, look, what I would suggest is the more people who run against the councillor, you split votes. So you've got to be very careful about the numbers that run in any one electorate. So with me at the moment, there's only myself or Jenny Hill. There is no one else running at the moment for mayor. It doesn't mean that somebody else might not pop in, but because the Labor Party or Jenny Hill is such a stronghold, if you divide the votes, you're going to divide my votes, not hers.
Yeah.
But in the electorates, in electorate number 5, 6, 7, and 8, there's only Team Jenny Hill nominees. So there's 4 seats out of the 10 at the table that she gets straight away unless somebody nominates.
Mm.
And to be quite honest, there's a pretty good chance because they haven't done anything. So if you nominate against Team Jenny Hill Division 6, Susie Batkovich, well, she's a sports star. But what has she done? What have you heard she's done?
Well, she actually is sort of running my electorate, and so far she's handed out some sausages at the park down the road that has had the playground burnt down twice, thanks to the wonderful crime scenario, which again we'll get into a little bit later as well. I think that it took something like 6 months of this, just roughly off the top of my head. I haven't got the stats in front of me. Like I started at 3 a.m. and I knocked off at 3 p.m. So yeah, it's been a bit of a mad dash to get this done. I can't remember the exact span of time, but it took months to get that playground built. And within, a few weeks, it was burnt down again, and it hasn't been restored I think we're getting into at least a year, if not more.
So if you look at your electorate, are the roads upheld? Is the street and everything mowed? And is it clean? Is it tidy? Do you have
I've got
safety issues?
I've got a my nature strip, and I get billed for the for the privilege of doing so. Not
That's
to mention
exactly
there's
right.
smashed out concrete right on the corner there that hasn't been fixed in 6 years. Actually, on that note, I was talking to another local the other day, and we just recently had the cyclone come through, and it was a Cat 1. It wasn't, it was a bit windy. Yet we lost power very quickly. And I mean, here in our area, the power lines are under the street. So it wasn't any power lines in our vicinity, yet we've somehow lost power. I can imagine, and from what people have told me, previous mayors were pretty diligent with getting around and cutting back trees near power lines and things like that would have prevented a lot of the power outages that we suffered. Now, that is a council issue. That's something they're supposed to maintain for that excessive amount of money they are charging us.
Yes, yeah, look, it is. And that's one of my pledges is the upkeep, the cleanliness of our suburbs. People in Townsville are no longer proud of what they have, their patch of dirt, because look around them. What have you got to be proud of when everybody else it's trash? Rubbish doesn't get collected. Walgaroo have got sewage seeping into their backyards. The water quality is atrocious. The power, yes, it's a state issue, but it's not dependable. We know that places like Adalia and Blue Water and all those go underwater. We've done nothing to prevent these things or to participate. But I'll tell you what Jenny Hill has done. She's increased her billboard account from $600,000 to $1.1 million. Which is great. Everybody wants to see Jenny's face.
Can you just repeat those numbers for me, please?
So $600,000 was the original billboards and advertising for Team Jenny Hill. It's now 1.1. But I'll tell you what they
everybody
took away.
Else has got to dip out of their pocket to promote themselves, correct?
But what they did take away was the sponsorship to St. Luke's and St. John's to mow the elderly's lawns because they couldn't. So they took $400,000 off them and put it straight into the advertising budget of Townsville City Council. I know, because my mother was one of those who can't mow. She can't do those things. She's an old woman. She's dependent now on a walker, and she cannot get somebody to mow a lawn when she had the privilege. She served under the flag. And that's how we respect our elderly and our disability.
So when you say your mother served, in what capacity did she serve?
So my father passed away in 2018. And it's only now I'm starting to, because the older veterans don't talk as much as the newer veterans. And no disrespect to any of them, all served. So mum served in the capacity of transport. So she drove everything from buses to tanks, the cars, the trucks, anything you possibly can. Her highlight was chauffeuring and ushering the Queen and the Queen Mother.
Oh, wow.
So there's a story in that, in what she's done and what she's been through, and the specialist people. She was also in a generation where, there was a lot of disrespect with women in the army. So she came through that, and she pushed against that. She had a lot of things that would go on, but she pushed against it. So I guess that's where I get my fighting style from. I learn a lot about what she went through and why things need to change. So, she served in the military for 20 years. Dad was in there for 25. I spent 5 years in the military in Perth. So I was in Signals, in Swanbourne, or Karrakatta, Fremantle, and SAS Swanbourne.
Nice. Which I think is very important in a military town, that you have an understanding of what our soldiers have gone through and what their needs in our town are going to be. Just about everybody in town has somebody or knows somebody who is military. I've got quite a few friends who've been military. You almost can't walk down the street without bumping into somebody who's military in some way, shape, or form. So
and we should be proud.
Definitely, especially as we're approaching a time where pride in our own country is somehow a civic offence, where elderly men on Australia Day are arrested and charged with inciting a riot for having little flags hanging out of their hat in their own country. So, I think it's a very important thing that we, have a breath of fresh air, like someone like yourself that's willing to do that. But I wanted to come back to something that you said earlier in regards to the council having a CEO. Can you elaborate on that for people who probably are not familiar with the inner workings?
So in the elections, we elect members that represent each of electorates and the community. The mayor oversees those 10 electorates, so all the councillors.
Mm-hmm.
And she also picks and chooses the CEO. And that CEO, Chief Executive Officer, is in charge of all the business in the council. Now, that CEO is hand-selected by Mayor Jenny Hill. So any business that goes on, any contracts are there, is managed by Jenny Hill. Now, she also says she has no conflicts of interest around the city, yet she sits on the board of Townsville Enterprises, Bulletin, airports, ports.
So she's on, hang on. So she is on the board of the one and only local newspaper.
Yeah, she advises them.
I wonder why they didn't give you a fair run.
But it doesn't stop there. It's also things like she's the Oasis Centre for the military, the veterans. She's the patron there.
Right.
Townsville Enterprise is a private business, and Townsville City Council gives them over $1 million every year. Now, if I have a business, I don't get gifted money by the council to run my business.
Yeah.
If I don't make it work, it doesn't work. What she's doing is feeding an enterprise for self-promotion. Now, you've got a Chamber of Commerce that's 142 years old and it's a non-profit, and they advocate for small and medium businesses. They're not getting anything like what Townsville Enterprise is getting. Big business and Jenny Hill. Jenny Hill is on the board of Townsville Enterprise, who she pays money to. If that's not a conflict of interest, I don't know what is.
Especially since she's using my money, your money, everybody in Townsville's money, to buy that influence in a sense. And it reminds me back when we were working together in the One Nation days, and Malcolm Roberts come to town, and we're not going to name anybody who turned up that day, but quite a few people turned up to express their grievances, pretty much about what you've just raised, and how many people felt bullied. And we're even afraid to put their face or their name to the words of what they were saying, what was going on. People who were trying to help out and do things in the community to help their fellow man were getting shut down because they weren't doing it her way.
Look, and that's very, very common. So every business in town is in some way affected by local, state, or federal funding. So, you could have a factory that has an apprentice. That apprentice's salary could be co-funded by the state government. When you have one party in power, local, state, and federal, that party controls those funds. You disagree with that party and their methods, you're suddenly under review when it comes to your funding stream. That's the leverage. That's the power. My campaign says you don't have to like, you don't even have to follow. Watch, because a vote is silent. A vote is silent. So she can't see that. An electoral sheet doesn't have Troy Thompson votes number 1 for Troy Thompson and signs it. It says 1, Troy Thompson. No one knows who put that in there.
Yeah.
And that's the power of the people, is votes are silent.
Definitely.
We can all nod our heads to Jenny Hill and say, yes, we'll do what you want. But on election day, it's very, very important that everybody says, we've had enough.
I agree. And the fact that we're staring down the barrel of nearly $4,000 a year for the privilege of having my own home to pay for her to do these things. Yeah, I can't afford to have Jenny Hill around anymore myself. I've pretty much had enough. There's quite a few things that I'd like to, have a yarn to her about. Look, there's a few people in, I mean, let's deal with some simple things. Obviously, the rates. What are your proposals towards rates? Is there, do you see there's a way we can bring that cost down so that I can afford to live?
Absolutely. So every government, every level of government have items that they're responsible for, right? But it doesn't mean that they don't overlap, because if you don't all work together, it doesn't work. And an example of that is a local council is invested in energy, hydrogen, a hydrogen plant out by Calcium. So there's lands and there's funds and there's investment in those. Why does the local council have to participate with that when they've got to look after water, sewage, roads, maintenance, the local community? Why do we have to keep investing in that? I get that we want to move forward in the future and do those things, but that is a state government item and they should be managing that. If we pull out of that, if we sell the rail yards that have been sitting empty forever, then all of a sudden we have got tens and $100 million sitting in a bank account. And by bringing down the debt, we can bring down the rates. The only reason the rates are so high is because we're trying to do too many big things and we're not concentrating on what is our basic, which is looking after our community, looking after our people. So we've got to get it right in the basic end and we can bring our rates down. So my proposal is, let's not allow the rates to increase any further. Let's stick it for 4 years and freeze it. Now, if I can bring it down after 12 months and we can bring debt down, we can bring rates down. But let's at least say enough. It's not going up anymore. Let's stop it right now so that we can pre-plan on ahead for the next 4 years and say, this is how much money I know it's going to cost me and it's not going to go up. And once we get the debt under control, because we've got a lot of assets in Townsville that are useless to us. So if we sold some of those assets, we pay down the debt. Unfortunately, the people who understand and don't understand the budget, we have multiple assets that have been overvalued. And what that does is it makes our debt look less. So you could have a home that's actually worth 500,000, but Mayor Hill might be saying, oh, it's worth 750. So the value seems like it's more than what we've got in debt. So the truth has to be told.
Definitely. They keep talking about truth telling. So, I don't understand what's so hard about it. Why do we need to legislate, telling the truth? Like, regardless of what truth it is, like, why not, like you said, just tell the truth. And as we were discussing earlier, like, I mean, you have to have a pretty good memory to keep bullshitting people. Like, it's hard work.
20 years in council for Jenny Hill. She's a career politician.
Yeah.
She knows what people want to hear. So let's just say it. You don't have to act on it. Just say it.
Yeah. And I've certainly noticed that amongst the crime rallies. Yeah. Very good at sitting at the back, listening to what everybody else says, regurgitating the popular narrative, then wandering away and doing 2/5 of nothing. On the process, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, mate. You go.
I was going to just sort of move in a slightly different direction, but you continue with what you're saying.
I was going to say, talking about the crime and safety, on my page the other day, we put about rocks around parks and the crime and all those, the knee-jerk reactive response. Now, I had put on my page a 2020 safety plan that the mayor wrote. 2020 is the same one as this one. It's now 2024. Oh, really? Hasn't changed. Nothing's been achieved.
She's done nothing.
But it looks great on a newspaper and on TV.
Yeah, especially when you're on the board of the newspaper. It's it's kind of hard to say they're unbiased in that regard. On the process of cutting costs, how much did our smart meter rollout for water end up costing us? Is that why my rates have increased so quickly? And I mean, I didn't even get a chance to say, look, I don't want your bloody smart meter. As this poor woman, had a go at it, but she was told she'd get fined for saying, no, I don't want one. I mean, I unfortunately, I never got a chance to say no. It happened that quick. Like I felt like the letter, as soon as the letter hit my mailbox, it was installed a day or two later. I didn't even get a chance to write a letter saying, I don't want this.
Yeah, because the decision was made by 8 out of 10 councillors who are Team Jenny Hill, who voted on it. Jenny said, I think we should do this. And 8 out of 10 who are in her party, the party named after Jenny Hill, they have said, yes, we agree, Jenny.
Yeah.
You didn't get to say anything. What
No.
I'm proposing is a point of difference. Every month, go and stand in a community centre and say, what do you think? What do we need to do? You might not always get your way, but you get heard. You can't accuse me then of not listening.
Yes.
There's no, and I will be held accountable because people will verbally barrage me and they'll tell me, you've done nothing. You've done, and you know what? That's a good shake-up. There is not one councillor in Team Jenny Hill that will stand out in front of a crowd and answer the questions.
We've got an interesting one here that I think you might want to have a read of and respond to.
Yeah. Subdivisions and councils. Well, absolutely, I do. So is it, you're talking about the one from Michael
Yes.
Saunders, yeah, about having zero idea of how and why rates work or exist?
Exactly. So please demonstrate your knowledge, if you will.
Yeah, look, absolutely. So I pay my rates, and in there's general rates, there's water rates, there's emergency services contributions, but the general rates continue to go up, right? We're paying for things that aren't being done. That would be a correct assumption, I would think. Now, rates are created to pay for the maintenance of water, sewerage, well, general rates for maintenance, roads, all of the things that a local government is responsible for. Now, what Michael's basically saying there is I don't know that if I pay rates, where my rates are going and what's involved in creating those rates. I do, because I see councillors, I see workers on the road get a traffic person in for 3 hours, then go to work for an hour and a half, then have lunch, then go for work for another hour and a half, and then go back and have a pre and post start meeting. Is that an efficient use of rates? So what I'm questioning is the whole process of what rates are about and why those rates are there, because there are assets where we can sell assets and put them against debt. That's what brings down council budgets and finances. When you can control that, you can control the ups and down levels of rates. Rates only go up because things have got more expensive, because they're not efficient in what they do. When you've got 3 line managers and 1 worker, what's that tell you? One guy's on the shovel and there's 3 around the hole telling him what to do. You're never going to get anything done. So that whole process of what rates are about, from the ground up, most people don't. That's a manager's comment. Don't understand what rates are. Well, I do. I was a gas fitter for a long time as well. I dug holes for a living. I put pipes in. I understand it from that level. And I went from that to a CEO. I know what a budget is as well. I know how to run a budget in a company. So you've got to have that understanding. How does a sports star who is a great basketballer understand a budget? You know, so often we see politicians in positions of power, like Mr. Giggles, who's now the Premier of Queensland, who doesn't understand what it takes to run a state. But he has got a degree in unionism, so that's important. A degree in unionism.
Pretty much it. So you mentioned, sale of assets.
Yes.
What kind of assets do you feel are not being utilized that we can, sort of cut the fat with?
Well, look, we keep putting proposals together as a local government to get things built. So to get the rail yards built out, to get around the stadium built out, to get around the port expanded, there are assets there. There's old buildings that could be sold. There's been so many developers come in and say, we've got this idea, but we're not letting it happen. We're not letting the city expand. Yes, people will come in and they will build it out, but do you think they're going to build it for it to look ugly, to not fit in with the landscape, to not bring revenue into Townsville? Or do we sit on an asset and they go, oh, we'll just wait for that to go up and the ideal opportunity to come, and we'll manage that asset. Townsville City Council has proved they can't manage assets. So let's move them on and use that equity to bring down debt. We, as ratepayers, should not be paying what we're paying.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, because I've certainly seen it. There's a lot of buildings around Townsville that, you know, have never really been open. There's some that are just recently starting to get going again. Parking is an issue that I feel, particularly in the city, is possibly a motivating force for why our town is a bit of a ghost town during the day. Like, I mean, I had a friend come up from Melbourne quite a while ago, and I took him for a walk midday in town, and he's like, where is everybody? This is really eerie. You know, he's come from Melbourne, you know, he's crawling over the top of people 9 times out of 10 to get through a door. So it was a massive contrast. And I'm like, well, you know, from what I can tell, this is what happens when you try and make a town pay for parking, when I can go to a business down the road, sells the same thing, and not have to pay for parking. What do you think about that, and how do you think?
Why should parking be the revenue stream? Sure, put a multi-story car park up and charge if people want to park there. But, you know, parking in the city shouldn't be about that. It's about bringing people into the city to spend money, to grow local business. Council should be supporting local business. What they're doing is turning people away.
Yeah, it seems that way.
You know, that's all they're doing, is turning people away by charging for parking.
I won't go there for that reason. I honestly, to me, it's too far out the way to want to go and pay for parking. I dread any time I have to go into town, because it's one of those businesses or, you know, institutes of some sorts kind of, well, it's the only place you can go. I hate it, you know, and I think, like most locals, you are happy to spend the extra 10 minutes driving around trying to find a free spot to park.
Well, isn't it odd that when you go and have to pay for a service, or even your rates, if you go into the Townsville City Council, you're not paying it online. You're going to pay for parking to go and pay for a service that you're being billed for. There's nothing like double dipping in politics, is there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. So what do you think we can do there? Do we just scrap the whole pay for parking thing? Do we perhaps, you know, maybe demolish a building or two and put in some free parking? Because, I mean, for me, I remember looking at some of the historical photos of the Townsville city, and there seemed to be a lot of more open lots there where people seemed to be parking from just a observational, you know, photographic one-shot look. I'm like, so perhaps it was easier for people to park back then because there's more spaces available. And I've noticed in my time that they've set up places now, oh, look, we put more parking in, but they seem to be outsourced to private companies that are also charging.
Well, it's it's town planning, right? That's what it comes down to, is planning. There's a reason Idalia flooded, town planning. When you go to a shopping center, I had somebody come to me the other day. This gentleman was a veteran who has MS, and he goes to a shopping center, and there's collect and pay parks, and there's 8 mother parks, you know, parenting parks, but there's 2 disabled parks. I don't know about you. Every time I go to a shopping center, there's plenty of disabled people in there, and he's got MS, so he has to park right down the end to walk in. That's a planning problem. Now, when you go to a car park in the city, to have to pay for things and then walk, there should be spaces open for car parks, multi-story car parks, but there should be spaces. Maybe 2 hours for free. If it's going to take more than 2 hours, then pay that little bit extra. But give patrons a couple of hours to experience and generate income into businesses that are local. I mean, the town obviously is empty.
And they seem to identify that that's an issue, because I think for the last 2 or 3 years, every Christmas, oh, look, for the month of December, you know, we're giving you free parking, you know, in an effort to try and promote businesses for just that 1 month. So they obviously identify that there's an issue there.
Well, there is. And look, it's revenue raising at its best. That's all it is. And what it stinks of is a council who has a mayor, 10 councillors, not communicating with their community and hearing what the community is saying, a CEO, a lot of line managers, and they're not able to manage a budget because the rates keep going up. Bills keep going up. Yes, the cost of living is growing. Yes, there's GDP increases, but they're not balancing a budget. So they're trying to recover whatever they can from wherever they can. And the ones that it's affecting the most is the people in the community.
Definitely. Yeah, the Freedom Call has a topic here that's a little controversial. Fluoride and other chemicals in the water must be addressed. Now, from my point of view, I've lost count of how many times I have written to people saying, I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it isn't. But can you prove that fluoride actually has some form of a benefit? And, if not, why are we doing it? And nobody has ever come back with a sufficient answer. Nobody has ever provided the science that we're alleged to have faith in. And I know there's quite a few people in the community who have expressed this to me. And obviously we have somebody who's bringing it up now. To me, on the idea of just cost cutting alone, if that fluoride doesn't actually have any benefit, as I understand it, it's costing us money to add that into our water. So is there a quick budget solution there to me?
Well, there's no answer to our water crisis at the moment. One, we don't have any safety in our water structures. There's not enough pipes. There's not enough water. We're not building enough dams. We aren't heightening the dams. There's no security. Then there's the quality of water, which is fluoride. Yeah. How many times you taste the water and 1 week it's good, next week it's not. 1 week it's this color, the next week it's not. There's
two filters on my tap.
Well, there's an issue with it then, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think it's time to start sending the bill to council to filter my own water to get rid of. I mean, I understand we need to add a certain amount of chlorine to get rid of this blue-green algae. And again, I got another notice via email saying we're having troubles and all this. And no sooner did that happen, you turn the shower on and it's like, holy shit, did I just jump in the pool?
Yep.
You know, like the chlorine, the smell alone, like I can't even bring it up to my mouth because the scent is just so strong.
So this has gone on for years and years, hasn't it? So, and there's still no solution. So at what point do we say, or does a politician say, because they're the ones who are making the decisions, I don't know what I'm talking about. They bring scientists in, but every time there's a pro and there's an against. We have to have a solution, but we have to take community consultation. Again, you've got to consult the community. There's professionals out there that can say it's good or bad. My view on it is it's too chlorinated. It's just simply too chlorinated.
Way too much, to the point where I have two filters on. So, personally, I think it's time to start sending a bill to Townsville City Council to say, look, this is what I have to do to make it drinkable. But again, considering Section 5123A of the Australian Constitution is pretty clear about, medications and whatnot, I can't help but feel that forced fluoridization is in breach of the Constitution.
Yes, it is. It is. And it's interesting you say, this is something that came up recently because I have obviously market stalls every weekend coming into the election. And a lot of these issues, exactly what you're asking me, the parking, the rates, the water security, the roads, the maintenance. Public health, public safety and public health is not just one level of government's responsibility. When you're tweaking the water levels and the quality of water, then you've got to take some ownership and responsibility and liability for your actions. And our local government isn't taking the liability seriously.
So good old Mr. Giggles here apparently isn't answering letters from the First Nations people after they, their party was such a proponent for truth telling and whatnot, according to Ramona here, which, as I understand it, is of Indigenous descent and has had some trouble in the past with these apparent Labor people who claim to care about the Indigenous people. What are your thoughts perhaps on how the community can do better for the Indigenous as opposed to just standing there virtue signaling a couple of narrative lines?
Look, at the end of the day, whether we're white, black, red, orange, and white and black seems to be the thing you can't say anymore because people get offended. But you know what? I went to school and I finished school in 1988, and all of us were mates. We all had one perspective. We didn't challenge each other. There wasn't activists throwing things in our faces all the time. Together, we should be working to find solutions for Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, PNG, multiculturalism, and Australians to fit into Australia. Because why do people come to Australia? Because it's a great country. So why are we doing everything in everything possible to change who we are and our makeup? So what we need to do is get back to the basics and support our mates. And whether they're Indigenous or they're not, we're supporting our mates and our neighbours. So I'm all for everything being equal. But don't disadvantage people. Make it equal. Make sure what Indigenous people get, non-Indigenous people get. But make sure we all get the same. And that we're not, taken not seriously, and that, racism comes into it and all these other factors, because it doesn't need to. We're all human. We all bleed. We serve together. So let's take this point of separation out and start treating people the same. It's the only way you can move forward is treat people the same way.
Very well said, mate. Very well said. So I think we dealt with the power and we did that fluoride. So the newspaper scenario, should we talk about that?
About our newspaper scenario? Yeah, absolutely we can.
Yep, cool. All right. So again, full disclosure, Troy and I worked together for several months on attempting to bring the local region alternative newspaper so that we don't just stuck with the Bulletin. There was obviously a lot of issues into getting that going, and unfortunately it all come a cropper. Would you like to give us a quick rundown? Because I'm sure they're going to drag it up in some way as some failed enterprise or something to that effect.
Well, possibly, but it comes down to Big Brother again tapping little brother on the shoulder. So, you establish a newspaper, and in all intents and purposes to drive home to people that they have an ability to write to a newspaper and that gets printed. That it's not altered, it's not adjusted. They've got something they want to hear about. It's a local sports club. It's a local community. It's a politician who wants to put a letter about what their view is, and we print that letter. Imagine that, printing a whole letter, a whole statement from a politician the way he wrote it.
And I believe we did that with the Kata Party, and they were like blown away because nobody ever done that for them before.
Yeah, and wasn't it great and a breath of fresh air, because people are saying, so I had sports clubs ringing me saying, you want me to write? Well, it's your club. I can't write about your club. It's your club. You write it, send it in. We'll do the grammatical changes, and we'll make it look pretty and in the right place. But the idea of it was to bring a community paper that everybody likes, and again, that's what I'm trying to do in council, that everybody participates in and that everybody benefits from. It's not about a controlling faction or a one side of politics or the other. It's about a community-driven initiative. But guess what? People above that said, no, you're doing okay now, and we don't like that because it's taking off what we do. And you know what? The byproduct of what we created as a newspaper is now prevalent in the Townsville Bulletin. Have a look on the Bulletin, and on the bottom of every page is a small ad. They got the big ads, the Harvey Norman.
The way we were doing it, right? Yeah, so I don't buy the Townsville Bulletin. I refuse to give them any money.
Well, look, I do it because they write rubbish about me, as I'm going into an election. I don't like them because, realistically, yeah. Well, what you want to see is something that everybody participates in, and there's a fairness in writing. It's not about creative writing.
Yeah.
It's about truth. So why not have a newspaper that takes, something that was interesting for me this week was when I spoke to Channel 7. They ran a story on Jenny Hill, but they had the courtesy of ringing me and saying, have you got a point to make about what Jenny Hill has just said? Would you like to put a statement together? I've never been asked that by the Bulletin.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, and to me, that's different. Somebody there is thinking outside the box. Maybe there's more than one side of the story. Maybe we need to hear all of it and hear it
It's
from
an
the
uncanny
horse.
concept, isn't it?
Yeah, imagine that truth.
Yeah, or hearing two sides of a story, you know, that the whole impartial investigative journalism sort of construct. And I just want to
But at
say
the end
thank
of
you, Dale, for
yeah,
appreciating the work that we did back then. It was, I had a lot of fun doing it, and it's a shame it didn't come to fruition. And I mean, one of the things I'd like to address too is like some of the dirty tactics that were being used. If you'd like to retell what happened.
change our print timelines, change our print dates, change the availability of when we can do it. So, you know, you write a weekly paper and you've got to have everything in by Wednesday, and suddenly they change that.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to enlighten the people that the only printing press that can produce a newspaper was the Townsville Bulletin. So we were kind of screwed and up against a rock and a hard place, requiring them, the competition, to print our stuff. And, you know, there we have sort of, would espionage be a good word for it?
Well, look, they were happy to take our payments, and they made sure it was done weekly. There was no credit extended. You paid for what you got at the end of each print run, even though there was 76 editions. They paid for it. We paid them. They were happy to take that money, but then they put some really stringent conditions in place. That's just not ethical. And it's not morally correct. And that's where we get back to, it's not good for the community. If it's good for the community, we all participate. We all share in profits. We all share in what comes out the other side. But, you know, it's very one-sided. It's very driven by a certain group of individuals. And unfortunately, we don't all participate in it. I certainly won't. I'll fight every step of the way. And that mayor that we've got now, I'm not there for second. I want to fight her for that position. But it's a big fight. If people don't vote, if they don't put, it can be silent, if they don't put my name on it, then you get more of the same.
Yeah.
At some point, you've got to take a stand, and somebody's got to change the thinking. And that's all it takes, is people to change.
So Jeannie here has, does Troy know about the health risks of ingesting fluoride? Has he heard there is a major court case in progress against the EPA? They are trying to prove there are risks to IQ of unborn children.
Yeah, look, I'm aware of multiple cases about fluoride in cities all around the world. I don't know to the umpteenth degree everything about a particular case, but as a holistic view, hand on heart, I know what we're getting in our water system, and the variations is because the unknown of what these people are looking after our water, that they haven't got the fortitude to make a decision and say, this is what we need to do. This is what's happening, because it's going up and down. There is no decision making on what level that fluoride, or even if it needs to be there. And no one wants to take ownership for it. It's pass the buck. I'm not going to pass the buck. What I'm going to say is I don't know enough about it, but I certainly want to find out.
Yeah. And, you know, that's always been my position too. So I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it isn't, but if it is so good and wondrous, then we shouldn't have a problem presenting the evidence. Yeah, especially after all this time, and they keep saying that the science is sound. So, well, present it. It's, you know, it to me, it's ominous because they won't talk about it. So, I think I've got most of my scenarios sorted. There's one. As I understand it, our council has signed up to certain UN charters towards things such as smart cities, which has led us to smart meters, you know, of both electrical and now water, to tie us back to what we were saying earlier. You know, there's talk of smart cities, and I believe recently, I think it was just this week, Sydney has announced that they're going to start trying to push the idea of these 30-minute smart cities, and they're going to stop people from driving cars and whatnot. And it seems that Jenny Hill is very much on board for these kinds of things. Where do you stand on that issue, mate?
Sorry, mate, it was breaking up. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep. Did you get the question?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so in regards to smart cities, I've never had a say in it. I don't know what's been presented. I do, because I've been privileged to find information, but I've never sat in a forum where everybody in the community is aware of what's going on and what's being put forward. It's like a little secret squirrel stuff, isn't it? We need to understand the content of what's coming down the line before we just sign up to something. I remember in year 2000 when they said all computers will go off, they're not going to work anymore because there's this, process that it's just going to drop out. You've got to change everything up. So, we get told lots of things, but I don't know enough about smart cities. So at the moment, I'm skeptical that it can work.
Yeah.
If I don't understand it and you don't understand it, but Jenny Hill does, that's great for Jenny Hill. But I think down the line, we all have to be educated in what this means. Where is it going to affect us? What is it going to cost? What is it going to do to us as a human society? Because is it replacement? Is it stopping jobs? I'm all for advancement and learning and understanding and transitions, but are we ready to just jump and go? Or do we need to investigate it without going over the top and be informed about the whole process of what's going on? Because they are rolling this out in Townsville. They signed off on a lot of it before they went into caretaker mode. They signed on a whole heap of contracts and committed money and contracts and budgets before they went to caretaker. That's how confident they are. But wouldn't it be interesting if suddenly a new mayor got elected and he said, hang on, let's stop that process. Let's take it back out to the people and get them to understand it, because they're supposed to be the people who vote. Their rates pay my income. So I'm accountable to them, aren't I? Or do we do what we've done now and we create our own party and take control?
Exactly. So, again, another element of that to me seems to be these ridiculous bloody orange scooters that are getting around. And I can't help but think that's another economic burden upon the taxpayer in a lot of ways. I've seen the utes getting around loading these things up, and they're running diesel. So don't tell me, we're saving the environment when you got diesel operated vehicles right around picking these ridiculous bloody scooters up. And, to me, I look at these scooters, the way that people treat them, such as them being thrown in the rock pool and, igniting fires and stuff, because salt water, and we're a coastal town, with cyclones and things. We've got salt water mixing with lithium-ion batteries, which we know is a recipe for disaster. I can't help but think this was very, very poorly thought out, if thought out at all. Would you continue to sort of look at that as a viable option? A lot of people do seem to use them, but we have high accident rates, and it seems to have almost turned into another form of revenue, as you got to use your little app to pay for usage, and then there's the fines that go along with it. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on the little orange scooters?
Well, I'd like to know whose liability it is by putting them out there. Somebody has an accident. Whose liability is it? The person? Are they signing up and saying, because I don't see a contract. Yeah. So what my understanding is, the council has put that in place. So they must hold some responsibility to any liability and any issues that move forward. So again, pull back on some of those things. What I do see is a lot of fires lately. How many people have you seen where they've got scooters and they're imploding in houses and causing fires, burning down houses? I don't know how many times I see them scattered everywhere. There's got to be more time picking them up and finding them without helmets, because they're somewhere else, than there is actually having them being used correctly. So, I'd go back to strip it back, take them away. Let's think about this. Again, it's got to be a people motion. I know I bang on a lot about you got to take it to the people, but we're the ones who are living here. We're the numbers. So it shouldn't be, yes, we elect an official to make a decision, but they should still talk to the community. Every single person I speak to, I would say 8 out of 10 aren't in favour of them. So I have to listen to that voice. Do I then go against the people who elect me and say, I mean, how silly is that? Two people say, yes, you've got to have them. So I take that on board and I put it in place and I roll out to the next election. Everybody hates me because I didn't listen to them. And yet here we are with a mayor who's done 3 terms and 5 terms as a councillor, and they keep re-electing her for poor decisions that she makes. So, again, community consultation. You can't just run with something that's liable, that's causing harm and danger. I have a big issue right now, and it is, the mayor brought it out last week on the show, rocks around parks to stop kids going on and ripping up parks. Now, that was a reactive response. But at the end of the day, so we've got these big fences around schools, right? When was the last time you saw a car go through the fence and rip up a schoolyard? Doesn't happen, right? So my thought process is, what if we had a parkland that instead of had rocks where you can kick a ball, run through the rock onto the traffic, the little child chases the ball, gets hit by a car. Or as a boy of a family of 4 boys, we would jump from rock to rock. How many broken bones, busted teeth, split heads do we have to go through? There's liabilities, they're not.
Yeah.
So to me, what if in that park you've got associations and sports clubs and you put a fence system in place that allows clubs to raise revenue, close the gates, allows you to have market stalls by gate takings, but opens to the public every other day. So you haven't got one club in town that's rich. You've got several parks and clubs, and that income goes back to that local community. You're using it, you're safe. There's no more cars being ripped up. The people who rip up the fields are employed by the council to fix what they broke. That's my consequences for crime program. Put them back into work. You want to rip up the field? That's no problem. Bring your wheelbarrow and shovel.
Now, are we moving into like state and federal jurisdiction here as far as making that a law, though?
Well, is the park
clearly no punishment for a lot of these people who are doing the wrong thing?
No, that's right. But you know what? The laws haven't changed in however long Labor has been in power, and LNP, right?
Yeah.
It's only because it's the flavour of the month. More and more people are losing property, getting hurt, getting injured. So all of a sudden, and it's an election year. Imagine that. We're all going to start talking more and more about this subject. Yeah, and we've all got an opinion. So again, that's right. But what changes? Nothing. The result is actually getting worse.
Yeah.
So imagine if you had a local government who wanted to participate in prevention of crime with a state government and a federal government. Imagine being able to, what you can downstream from federal and state, because it's your town as a local council, it's your town, it's your park that's being ripped up. So I have to pay for it, or you as a ratepayer have to pay for it to be fixed. So why don't we put consequences of crime programs in place? And the council employs some of these bad kids, puts an ankle bracelet on them, and says, now you go to work. There's a consequence for actions. Let's put you to work. But you know what I'll do? I'll pay you, and then I'll take a portion of that and we'll put it into a victim of crime account. And we'll pay the spur debt down that you've created in the courts to pay the court systems back. But what you will learn is to respect property, to earn a living, and start a career. And that's going to be funded by the state and federal government, but the council will run it. And that's participating in reducing crime.
Sounds like a good idea to me, man. Like, like how I got young kids who can't play on a playground because there's this crime going on, and Susie hasn't bounced a basketball in that direction. So
That's
I mean, I see
exactly
why
right.
they've chosen her for this region, because you got the Murray Sports Complex out there, and she was the Townsville Fire, and they played there, and very, very clever marketing strategy on Team Jenny Hills. But yeah, side, but yeah, I agree. I don't see any councillor qualifications, nor have I seen any council qualifications at the time that she's been there. Nothing against her. I think she's, fine basketball player and a lovely person and all that, but I've not seen anything.
Look, no one's having a shot at we're not having a shot at the individual, but when you run for a position, you should be qualified.
Mm.
You don't get to then say, I'm a councillor now I'll learn about the job. You need to be prepared. You need to understand what's ahead of you, not be told by your mayor what you're going to do, and you're the flavour of the month, so we'll use you as the poster child. Yeah. It's about having the ability to manage what's in front of you.
Yeah, Laura agrees. Fence rather than a camera. It's just, I was talking to one of our local neighbours at the crime rally where Aaron Harper, showed what a wonderful human being he was and the compassion for all the victims of crime. Called us all renter crowds and whatnot. It was a lovely display, a very, very typical sort of a Labor sort of a thing, or you don't like me, I'll just insult you. But that wonderful, stunning display of compassion aside, that neighbor expressed how they have security cameras out front of their house, and the criminals, basically knowing that there is a camera there, purposely come and park stolen cars there, wave and do a little dance in front of their cameras, and they hand it to the police, and the police do what they can, and typical catch and release program, yibbity yibbida, that's all, folks, and they're out the next day.
Yeah, look, it keeps going, doesn't it? It is catch and release, keeps happening, will continue to happen until all governments participate and we change. If we don't change our actions, you get the same, don't you? My motto in this campaign is, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And it's exactly that. We haven't changed a single thing. All we've done is increase the crime rate. So if we don't all work together, what's going to happen at this election is, right now, is if Jenny Hill gets voted back in, she'll support Aaron Harper and Scott Stewart and Les Walker. And what have they delivered?
Who won't answer my emails anymore?
Yeah, but what have they done for crime in the city? Nothing. So you elect a different mayor. You elect a different mayor who knows that these state members in October are going to a state election, and calls them out and says, hey, are you going to do this? Because if you're not, I'll make sure that everybody in the community knows what you didn't sign up for.
Yeah.
That's what Jenny won't do, because she's in the same party.
Exactly.
Call them out.
It's a hive. It's a hive, the way they operate. And, it's funny because, as far as I understand, I thought councillors weren't supposed to be politically biased to parties, but ours clearly is.
Well, we're the only council out of 77 councils in Queensland where they've got their own party. And the mayor, the party is named after the mayor. So here's the interesting thing, is if Mayor Jenny Hill if I was to beat Mayor Jenny Hill and there was still more than 5 Team Jenny Hill members on the council, you go to a vote in the council chambers, Jenny's still pulling the strings of the people sitting at the chamber table.
Because I assume she's not going to lose her position on any of these boards that she's part of.
Well, no, they're paid. Why would you? And the other thing is, you've got to remember that LGAQ, so Local Government Association Queensland, which is the board for all the councils in Queensland, she's the vice chair of. The vice chair of every single council in Queensland. Interesting, the positions that people get into, isn't it?
Yeah. And you can't tell me this isn't a conflict of interest.
Oh, no, there's never a conflict of interest.
Yeah, you got to wonder, and how much time can you possibly commit to any of these enterprises when you dipped into so many things?
Well, you don't have to, because you pay for consultants who pay consultants who pay consultants who have many micromanagers and department managers and CEO-ships, and that's how you leverage business. You leverage business. So big business is being told, if you do this, you'll get some funding. You don't do this, unfortunately, the funding will have to be reviewed. We all know that happens. That's why people don't want to talk or speak up. You said it earlier, if you get seen to go against what is currently in place, you start losing favour. But as I keep saying, votes are silent. Vote them out. Then they can't use that leverage anymore.
Yeah. Laura, can you please? What happens to Team Jenny Hill if someone gets in? I think we need to elaborate on that question a little bit. I think Troy sort of just stated that, even if she's gone, if there's enough members of Team Jenny Hill, she still has influence. If that answers that question. So
yeah, she's the head of the party, which is called Team Jenny Hill. So if I was to beat her, because there's only her and I at the moment, so if I was to beat her, I sit at the head of the table. Now there's 10 councillors. If 6 councillors are Team Jenny Hill and they want to move something in the chamber, 6 versus the other 4, they win. They get to move their rules. But as mayor, what I can do in that instance, because I'm not Team Jenny Hill, is I can call them out, because they can't put a gag order on the mayor. But they put a gag order on Fran O'Callaghan and Sue Blom, but you can't gag the mayor. So imagine a mayor coming out and say, this councillor, this councillor, this councillor doesn't like what you suggested in the community. At some stage, you're going to break them down.
Definitely. So, Troy, when you become mayor, please set a new paradigm and back it with community in mind and bring community together. It all begins locally. I believe that's pretty much what we've been saying, yeah?
Absolutely. Look, it's about, as I said, every month, meeting with community. Take the good and the bad. I fight. So I'll stand out the front every time and let people yell and carry on, but we will have a civilized debate about what needs to happen in the community, in each area, and build the community from the base up, because we're going to start again. Get back to basics and get it right.
He got to just, it was all right. Okay, cool. I'm guessing that she's satisfied with that answer. Crime is condoned. So yeah, actually, before I go any further, is there anything else about your campaign that we want to bring up? I might just quickly bring up, and we'll start taking some questions, so long as they're not ridiculous. And I know generally I'm happy to discuss the conspiracy theories, guys, and some of the more deeper stuff. Please bear in mind we are going to YouTube, and YouTube are very stringent about a certain topic that somebody has brought up a couple of times. It's not that I'm trying to avoid it; it's just I'm trying to get some coverage here to various different sources. I'm sure Troy will be happy to answer the more extreme questions that YouTube won't allow us to talk about, if you care to email him. But this is Troy's pledge here. Accountability and transparency, which I believe is pretty straightforward and we've kind of covered. Local conscience for crime programs. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that? I kind of feel we covered it, though.
Well, I think we did. It's at the end of the day, there's got to be consequences for any action that's illegal, and let's put them back into work. Build some respect and pride back into the community.
Obviously, improved roads, water, sewage infrastructure. I think we went through that pretty extensively. Personal and business rates freeze for 4 years, which we covered. Increased support for elderly, disability, and defence. I think. Is there anything you want to add to that?
You talked about parking and planning and all of that. That includes our vulnerable people. So you got your and defence. We're a garrison city. They're not supported. They come out of army and they lose their support. So it's about building the community around and supporting those people who have supported us all their lives. When did we stop caring about our neighbour who's disabled, or our friends that are older? It's almost gone out the window. The other day, I saw somebody on a bus get on a bus and never stood up for an old lady who had a false leg. She had to stand there for a bus ride. That is just atrocious. And that comes down to no pride in city because of what we're being dealt. So it's about making sure that we look after all of those demographics and others. You know, we talked about Indigenous before. It's not about special treatment, same treatment, but proper treatment, respect. That's gone out the window. Let's bring that back.
Wholeheartedly agree. So sale of unnecessary council. Yeah, we got that. Reduced council debt. Yeah. What is the current debt actually? How much has council overspent?
Well, I would suggest that behind closed doors, there's more than one budget. So the budget itself says nearly $1 billion.
$1 billion for this little town.
But when you talk about equity and debt, so we're saying that there's $460 million worth of debt, $500 million worth of debt. Remember that the debt value is squashed when you overvalue your assets.
I see.
So all looks great on paper, but what that means is you've overvalued your house to make your debt look less.
And when it comes time to foreclose, you end up with a bigger hole in your pocket.
Yeah, so I would suggest that your $400 million debt is somewhere around the $700,000.
Right. How long do you reckon it would take, just roughly off what information you have available? Obviously, once you get in there, you probably have access to things you don't have access currently. But based on what you know, rough ballpark, how long do you think it would take to get that debt down? Could it be done in one term?
Look, my goal is you'll never pay. It's great to have some debt, right? And the reason you have some debts is you get tax credits, depreciated values, you get concessions and all of those. But it's got to be a manageable debt, and we're not really managing debt if we've got to keep raising the rates and all the other bills and cost of living goes up. So we need to get just that debt down. So to bring the debt down, it is 100% possible to bring it down in a 4-year term. I don't plan to be just there for 4 years. Yeah. But it's about being a profitable and efficient city, right? Yeah. So there's got to be investments, but it's not to bring the debt up. We've got to bring the debt down first, and we've got to bring basic services back.
Yeah.
So, yes, I would say that within a first term, we can get to where we need to be financially, so that we're positive moving forward and our rates are then manageable and cost effective.
So you've got a long-term plan, even though, the 4-year term, but should it come to re-election 8, how far into the future have you sort of got in your mind roughly?
Well, it's interesting. I look at it. I'm very passionate about Townsville because I went to school here. I played sport here. My mum and dad were here. The army were here. My brothers are here. My brother died here. My friends are here. My partner's here. Everybody around me that I love and know are here. So I'm very passionate about the people around me in my community. I feel a sense of servitude to make sure that the guys around me are looked after, and however long that takes. But I don't want to leave. I want to leave it in a better place than what it is now. Mm-hmm. But I want to leave it in a place that somebody can pick it up and be proud of what they've got. When I win this campaign, I'm not picking it up on something I'm proud of. So there's going to be immediate changes, things that people will be happy about. Long term, I'd like to say there could be 2 or 3 terms in me, but I don't know. That is up to the people, and I will personally hold myself accountable, but I want the community to hold me accountable. And that's what they should be doing with Jenny Hill. She's done nothing for us. So why do we keep re-electing her?
Got me. I can't say I've ever voted for her, that's for sure. And I struggle to find people who have. You know, maybe it's just a circle of people I work with or come across in my day-to-day life, you know, likes attract the likes sort of thing. But yeah, I can't say I've ever come across someone who says, I love Jenny Hill. Geez, I'm glad I voted for her. Never,
Yep.
ever heard that
Yep.
in the 6 years that I've been here. So improved sport, art and recreational facilities. What have you got in mind there?
Well, you know, we talked about parks and revenue and sports clubs, because one of the big drains on a city council is you've got to keep funding clubs and pay for maintenance. Or imagine having a fence there and providing funds so that clubs can share the maintenance. So your costs as a council go down, their profitability goes up because they're able to raise more revenue. So that helps the clubs and those recreational associations. They look after the asset because they're proud of it. It's something they can respect. And then you look at the Arts Centre. Interestingly, I had somebody from the Townsville Performance Arts Centre come to me and said, did you know that the civic council or civic chambers at the moment is only at stage 1? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it's sold out every year, but it was proposed to be, all that land around it was supposed to be so much more than what it is. And we've got all these plans in, but we've moved other performing arts and other things in, and we've never finished off. And we don't really have an area where we go to Civic Theatre, but there's a couple of plays and things, but you can't do much there. Well, the expansion of that facility was going to be so much more. But we only ever finished stage 1. I didn't know that. So that was from somebody who is a patron of the arts in Townsville. And he said, and that stopped when Jenny Hill bought out other arts areas.
Right.
We forgot the arts community. So let's reinvest back into that. Let's make stage 2 and 3 real. Let's complete jobs instead of putting them on hold.
I'd like to see some more arts in particular, you know, and, you know, perhaps something that's not 100% left biased kind of arts. Like, you know, if people want to do the trans thing, that's wonderful. But I feel like it's catering to a very small minority. Here on Cafe Locked-Out, Michael is a playwright, and he has said on many occasions, you know, that there's a lot of grants and all that are given to that kind of a community, you know, and it seems like people write to that style because that's where the grants are.
Well, they know the words that need to be said to get the grant, right? Yeah, but
exactly.
They can't do what they actually want to do.
That's it. And he found a way to make it quite successful, you know, and he became one of the only sort of playwrights that was producing content that wasn't that way inclined and still able to function. So in your arts world, do you think we can have more diversity?
We should be. Absolutely. That's what the Civic Theatre and what they created, when you talk to those people, was supposed to be about, was diversity. Let's diversify everything in the arts and give everybody the opportunity, not a demographic. Let's make it available to everybody, because there's a lot of people in Townsville. We're not all the same. God help us if we were. Yeah. You know, so let exactly the perfect word, diversify. Let's put more money into the arts and grow it, because people will come if we do it. So let's put it out there and complete projects. We're not completing projects. You know, I've had road engineers in Townsville come to me and say, you know, we get to a point, we run out of money because we've overinvested, or it's blowing out. So we put a fence around it, we stop it until the next round of funding comes. So we don't complete projects. Yeah. Let's concentrate on one thing at a time and finish it. Definitely.
And we've all seen, you know, it's the common joke. And, you know, I think you mentioned it in passing, you know, probably about an hour ago, you know, that, you know, somebody slacking off at work, you know, what are you doing? Oh, I'm studying to be a council worker, you know, and it's not just here. It's a nationwide epidemic, you know, where council workers don't seem to really put a lot in. And I've come across a lot of council workers who, again, won't publicly speak out because of ridicule and, you know, potentially loss of job and whatnot, who have expressed excessive amounts of waste in the way things are done. You know, and people they've been, you know, when asked about it, they're told things, oh, who cares? It's ratepayers' money, which is pretty insulting when you are working in the community and you as the council worker are part of that rate paying community, whether you're own your house or you're renting, if you're renting, that rent is part of that cost of rates is inclusive in your rent. So whether you I don't care, I'm a renter, is possibly one of the most ignorant things you could say, because if those rates come down, your rent will probably come down too. So, I think it's a ridiculous statement. I can't believe somebody in council, would actually say that to council workers. Who cares? It's just rate.
They do. And the reason they do that is, what have they got to look up to?
Yeah.
What you look at the head, you got to stop the rot from the top. You got to cut that off. And everybody above them is falling in the same. You do fall into a routine. When you have pride and respect for your community and what you do as a job, you do it better. And unfortunately, when you are cultured into doing the same mundane thing all the time, not respected, then your performance starts to drop, doesn't it? So why not have somebody you can look up to and say, I want to be like that. I want to improve. I want this city to look great again. I can be part of that. But when what comes down the line is not, there's no co-ownership. It's ownership from the top, and you do what you're told. That doesn't work.
No. That's socialism. That's communism.
Exactly what it is.
It's a dictatorship. So, moving along. Cleaner city and neighborhoods. I don't think we've really talked about that too much. We're mindful of the time, so we'll kind of move quickly as we can so we can get to some questions. So by all means, make your comments in the questions. We will get to them. So
the cleaner cities is about exactly that. Everywhere I walk, everywhere I go, we've got Dave who does the illegal dumping and looks at all of that and tries to help out. And he's forever on there fighting about the illegal dumping. You know what? If you had more green waste areas and the green waste was mulch and you had free mulch for garden beds, if you had free tip runs, once every month, free tip runs. So people would go and drop their rubbish at the rubbish tip.
Yeah.
If you have free council pickups once a quarter or once every 6 months, but I'd say a quarter, then people aren't dumping it somewhere because it's going to come and be picked up. But you've got to put these things in place. Yes, they cost money, but how much more money does it cost to go and clean up a waste area? These people like Dave are soldiering on and doing everything he can for Townsville beautification. You go around the corner and somebody's dumped something else. So you put some of these things in place, you change, what is in front of you. You change the way people think, oh, well, you know what, there's a tip run, because people don't have money sometimes to go to the tip. Yeah. So what do they do with it? They try and put it in the next door neighbour's bin.
Yep.
Try and put it somewhere else. And that's why dumping happens.
Carve it up into pieces and throw it out over a long period of time and hope a cyclone doesn't come to ruin your plan. And
so change the process and make the city clean. You go to Singapore, there's no dirt, there's no rubbish, there's no anything, because everybody picks up after themselves.
And you get 10 lashes for throwing your chewing gum around. I think even possession of chewing gum, isn't it? Personally, I'm all down for that. I'm so sick of standing in chewing gum. I think it's one of the most disgusting things with people throwing their bloody chewing gum everywhere. It drives me nuts. It's probably outside of a mayor's position to start, whipping people in the street publicly for chewing gum. But look, man, you'll have my support.
Yeah, look, and things like cars parked backwards and caravans and boats being left to rot on the road and all that. Let's move on. I'm happy for people to get fines for that, because let's find a space to put these things in, right? So you got caravans, let's put them somewhere. If it's a small fee, pay a fee, but get a fine if you're going to leave it there and rubbish your neighbourhood, because it makes everybody not respect what they've got and be proud of what they've got. Because you can have somebody 3 doors down that the lawn's 6 foot high, and there's 25 cars on the property. There's nothing worse. That's no pride in your town, because it comes from the top again.
I think you actually are awoken an idea that I had like weeks ago that I was going to ask you. in that town planning scenario, I've noticed in a lot of the newer estates that are coming out, we've got some bloody small properties, 350 square meters. That is absurd. The street sizes are ridiculous. Now, having started driving trucks, I can tell you, trying to get around those newer areas to, you know, deliver people's things. You know, the trucks are, you know, how things get there. You know, you move into your new house, the first thing that happens is the truck usually. They can't get around. I don't know what lunatic has been planning out these places. They're like rabbit warrens. The streets are tiny. There's no parking. They're setting up some tiny houses with one garage. Most people have two, you know, cars. Your kids grow up, become teenagers, 3, 4 cars turn up. What nut job is planning out at the moment? I think we know the obvious answer, but man, is there something?
It all comes down to town planning. It all comes down to town planning, and I agree. You know, everything. What about the garbage truck that's got to go up and down the street and there's a car parked on either side? What do you do then? So it's no different whether it's a furniture, it's a delivery truck, it's a garbage truck. Then they're not planning things correctly. The cars, the utes and things are getting bigger. They're taking up more space. The trucks can't get around. So you've got to allow for that. The properties are too small.
Yeah.
You know, they're not retirement villages, but that's almost like what we're building now.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Let's all live on top of each other.
Yeah, it's madness. I can't help but feel it's almost like they're creating a parking nightmare, you know, almost intentionally, you know. And I mean, this is a rural town. It's not that big. I don't understand how we can have parking problems in such a small place, you know. And again, it's a nationwide epidemic of bad planning. You know, it's almost like they're all cookie cuttering the same stupid bloody ideas.
Could it be less pipes, less roads, you know, more banged into one area, less costs? You know, you think more about it that way, because that's probably how they're looking at it. Yeah. They're not looking at the long-term pride, respect, so there's lots of things to read into that.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious factor from the developer point of view was, 350 squares versus the 1,000 squares. Oh, wow, we've suddenly just turned one property into 3. Council's sitting there thinking, wow, now that's 3 lots of rates we can get as opposed to 1. Cram them in, more money for everyone. You know, it seems like a lot of people are just sitting there throwing them dollar signs up and rubbing themselves with it and having a great time while people are living in squalor. You know,
it's it is an epidemic, mate. Things have to change, but until you change the head and the parties, you keep getting the same result. So it's silly that you got to keep saying to people, well, you complain about it, but you're not willing to do anything. You're not willing to change what you don't believe in. You're willing to just go with the crowd. When did Australians become that way? Because all the Australians I always grew up with were able to speak up and have a bit of a joke and make their own decisions. Now we follow the leader. Yeah. And what a leader we've got.
Yeah, not one I wish to follow. That's for sure, my friend. That's for sure. Yeah. So, but on that, I'd just like to remind people there are still places to be a councillor, to work alongside Troy, hopefully, and let's get some change. I know there's a lot of people out there. I hear they want change, but look, there's only some of us that are working real hard to get that happening. Jump on board, help out where you can. There's so many things that can be done. Even if you don't feel your councillor material, get behind somebody who is, hand out some flyers, help your fellow people. I'm sure Troy could use a bit of a leg up in a lot of ways. But we'll come to how they can get to contact with you as we get safer cities and neighborhoods. We've addressed that point. So let's get some quick questions in here while we've still got some time. I'll just quickly roll back. So we've had a few come through. I'm just going to get to the good questions here. Some people are being a little bit ridiculous.
I love the hard questions, mate. So,
so long as it's a question and not just something that's either kind of been addressed or just stupidity. Okay, so what page is this on Facebook? I can't find it on Cafe. Cafe Locked-Out has had some trouble on Facebook. I'll address that more on Sunday, but North Queensland Freedom Network on Facebook is still functioning. But of course, you found us on Rumble. So, I mean, that's the way I would suggest people go there. Yeah, that's saying the same thing. I'm in Victoria. That's not going to help us much. Troy, when you become mayor, can you bring back the Pacific Festival? I'm not for sure. I don't think I've even seen a Pacific Festival. Tell us.
That's why.
Yeah,
you know,
it's obviously a long time.
It's almost like pick and choose the demographic you want to have, right? So
what is the Pacific Festival?
Well, it's all about islanders and right. Celebrating the island nations and different. You know, Fiji, Samoan, Tongan, and it's gone. Where did it go? But you know what? We've got India.
I would have thought that'd be the kind of thing that Jenny Hill and all her Labor cronies would love to virtue signal.
Well, yeah, but we don't even recognise Australia Day. We don't give out awards on Australia Day in Townsville anymore. So, so where are we going? We're not respect. You know what? Pacific nations were part of the Anzacs. You know, so there's a sense of pride in that. And I've got no issue with celebrating all nations and all cultures and all things, but let's do it all in fairness. Let's not select.
Townsville does have a lot going on for families, which is a good thing. Yeah, that Cowboys Stadium is ridiculous. The old one was much better for families. To be honest, I kind of inclined to agree. I really like the old family feel of the other stadium, and I can't help but notice that the parking situation at this new one is absolutely horrendous. And that, I mean, you know, when you got to block off roads and towns and cities, like, what were they thinking? Like,
well, you know what? You can't get from one end of Townsville to the other. Why not install a light rail network or put some? You know, when I was in Germany, and my son and my daughters were very happy that they didn't have to go and get a license because everywhere they went there was public transport that supported getting from A to B to C. So why haven't we got these structures in place? Because the buses miss their spots quite often. No disrespect to bus drivers, they're part of the community. You know, the coordination, the planning, all of that's out of whack. Let's make things easy to get to. People don't come to town because you can't get parked. Hard to get in there. Roads are closed. We don't know what's working, which way, whether we're going to have a mall or not a mall. You know, all these things keep changing. That was a car park. Now it's not. So we need to change what we do. I agree. The old stadium was great for families. The new stadium was to get in with what is the generic stadium these days.
Up with the Joneses.
But, you know, when you look down south at, say, Cronulla Park or some of the older football fields, they're still the family stadiums. And guess what? Penrith Stadium, they pack it. They got grass hills all the way. It's not this big round stadium or the toilet seat looking lid. It's a proper field. You know, where you've got a hill and you've got a sitting area and it's great. You know, we've got to make use of the stadium we've got now. So I get that. But the family atmosphere is gone. So we've got to build that back.
Yeah. Can we improve the parking situation? Like
absolutely.
I feel like there's some land around there that could be used for parking.
There's plenty of land. And why not build a couple of multi-stories? Why can't we?
Yeah. Exactly. And that to me seems to be, you know, at least within reason, some form of an extra revenue sort of scenario.
Well, you can host a lot of events at the stadium.
Yeah.
But you can't park there. You have to take a bus from out Whoop Whoop to get in. Yeah.
And it's a bit of a mission when everything's blocked off, half the roads are closed. Like, how are you supposed to get the bus in there? It's nuts. Let's keep moving though. Any plans for affordable housing? I mean, I think if we made the blocks any smaller, you'd be living in, you know, a caravan
or tents even.
Look,
the answer is yes. We want to sit down and work with all levels of government about funding and be constructive about what do you mean by affordable housing? What is acceptable to families? You know, what are we actually looking at? And again, where's the community consultation?
Yeah.
We need to understand what community's expectations are, because it's all well and good saying, what do you deem as affordable housing? Because I can tell you the Premier doesn't live in a squalor.
Yeah.
He lives somewhere pretty comfortable. So everybody's got different levels of what that is. But again, our majority is built around our community. So we've got to understand what affordable housing is. And I'm all for making sure that we construct it so it fits our demographic, our population growth, and just ensure that everybody is housed and we're not homeless.
I'm not sure about this delinquent government. David Hurley should dissolve. Sorry, I'm not up to date with that one. Is that something you know about, Troy?
I assume it's the Governor General should dissolve the government because it's inefficient.
It's not really council related. So
look, I think it's more of a statement.
So try to stick with reasonable council questions, if we could, please. Will you scrap the welcome to country?
It's an interesting one, and it's a topic that people shy away from. I'll answer the question. If I had my view, look, I think it's got a place in certain areas, but not every time I enter a plane, not every time I go to a sports field, not every time I have a council meeting, not every time there's a function. You know, it used to be something that people went, wow, isn't that great? But all of a sudden, it's engulfing what we are as Australians. So it's not disrespecting of Aboriginal and Indigenous people. It's about, let's be fair. We don't need that. I get sick of being told that I'm not Australian and that I don't understand. I was born here. I don't need to be welcome to my country because this is where I was born. But what I do is I do respect that Aboriginal people have an attachment to Earth different to what we do. So we have to respect that, but we don't have to play this game all the time. Let's make it a special event and a special occasion that, you know, we play our national anthem, we raise our flag, and we can celebrate who Indigenous people are, but let's not do it every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because we're playing to the mob. That's all it is.
And as I've said in previous podcasts, I feel that it's cheapening the value of what being welcomed to country really is. And for anybody who wants to know more about what that really is, tune in next week. I actually have a wonderful Indigenous insider who's going to share some things. We're going to do some real truth telling. You know, we don't need to legislate it. We're just going to do it. So tune in next week, same bat time, same bat channel to hear more on that. We did the free parking. I don't know that we've got any more questions here that I think are, you know, particularly relevant to what's going on.
Young Christian Price just come up on the screen about the free parking. He's one of the independents, one of the strong people have said, hey, you know what? I'm going to have a go. I'm going to have a go, and I'm going to put my hand up, and I'm going to run against Mark Malachino, the deputy mayor. So he deserves a vote and an opportunity, because if you want to get rid of Team Jenny Hill, you got to remove people like that. So awesome. Christian's running in Division 4.
Awesome. And Christian, mate, feel free to drop us a line. We can get you in and have a yarn to you as well, and you can tell us what you've got to offer. My email, nqfreedomnetwork@protonmail.com if you'd like to drop me a line. Anybody who wants to get in contact with Troy, here's his Facebook. Do you have any other methods of contact?
Yeah, look, on my Facebook, there's email. My mobile's there. As well as that, I announce my events every week where I am. People can see me. I'm pretty much getting out. I'm like everybody else. I'm a person who works long hours. Mark and I both talk about that. So I work ridiculous hours because you got to pay bills, right? Yeah. So I don't get the luxury of having a 6-week holiday while I campaign. I'm working. I'm doing my campaign after work and on weekends. But all of that is about meeting people. So you'll see it on my page where I am. This weekend, I'm in North Shore having coffee, talking to all the locals out that way. And then I'm at Cotter's Market on Sunday.
No worries. Do you actually have any other social medias, or is it all pretty much Facebook?
Well, we have social, Instagram, Twitter.
X, the
TikTok.
artist formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, or X, what do we want to call it? TikTok, and look, it's not my forte, okay, but I have very limited ability to get my name out. So the best way for people to understand who I am is exactly what we're doing here. What I've got to say, make your judgment. Yep. I don't hold anybody, whether they like me or not. I am who I am. And I'll answer the question. I certainly don't play diversion politics.
Yep. No, awesome, mate. Awesome. Well, we are coming to that 2-hour mark. I think it's been a really good show. Thanks heaps for coming on, man.
No, it's been great to talk to you again, mate. It's been too long, way too long.
Yeah, it has. It has been a long time since we've had a yarn, and this was definitely an interesting way to do it. All right. How long have we got till election time, mate?
So the election is on the 16th of March. But between the 4th and 15th of March is that the pre-election, so your 2 weeks of voting. Postal votes are pretty much, the ballot draw is on Wednesday this week. So then we know what position we want to put people, where I'm going to sit on the card. Doesn't matter, as long as you put one beside me, I'm happy. If you don't, that's all right. But we need Jenny to go last. So if there's 2 of us, she should be number 2. If there's 3 of us, she should be number 3. Definitely. At the end of the day, we've got to get rid of what we have now to make change. The election's the 16th. Most people get out before that. I'll be at all of the polling booths throughout the time and talking as much as I can to people. And I appreciate your time and taking the time to get me on here and talk to the audience, because that's the only way they're going to get to know me.
Yep. Definitely, mate. Definitely. So, and I don't know, maybe we can get you back just before that happens. We'll see how things pan out. Maybe we can even get some of the other, potential candidates in and have a little bit of a debate or something, just throwing that out into the ether. If people want to, I'm happy to facilitate a platform where these things are done. So, because I don't see a debate happening on the Townsville Bulletin. It's
interesting, mate. I've got a debate on the 1st at the moment. It's Jenny versus me.
Okay, cool.
At the casino, and of all things, it is the editor of the Bulletin is going to be the person who'll be asking the questions.
Wow!
And then it's a Chamber of Commerce event. And then there's also a debate at North Queensland retirees. So for our elder generation, North Queensland Conservation Society. So at the James Cook University. So there's lots of little debates, discussions. Some people may go, some people may not go. I'm not hiding. Happy to stand out the front. I think unless you heard, you people don't know who you are. So, I think you've got to get out there as much as you can with what you're given as an opportunity.
No worries, mate.
So I appreciate all the time that you've given me.
No worries. Look, mate, it's been a pleasure. It's always good. This is the North Queensland Freedom Network, and I like to be free and talk to North Queenslanders. It's what the whole thing was really there for, to reach out to the community and get some real community engagement, because I certainly didn't see a lot of that in, my former employment as in the media. I think we need alternative media to keep them on their toes.
100%.
So, thank you very much, my friend. I might just chuck you in the backstage. We might have a bit of a yarn afterwards, because, I think we've got a few things we should probably have a yarn about. It's been a long time. I'll wind up the show and I'll talk to you in a minute, mate.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time, mate.
No worries, mate. So thank you all very much for participating and watching. It's been another wonderful show. I'll be back again on Sunday at 11 a.m. to do good old fail of the week. There's a bit of a shout out here for Jeannie, Lee, Jennifer, Gaza, Mark, Carla, Karina, and Ruben, who have all become Patreons. You can become a Patreon too and support the network that supports the people. If you've got stories or you want to reach out to me in some way and, become a part of this amazing community we're developing here, NQ Freedom Network at protonmail.com. Don't be afraid to drop me a line. And I'd also like to send a very special thank you to Fiona, who emailed me and wanted to personally donate some coin to helping me fund what we're doing here. So very big thank you to Fiona, who is also looks like she's chasing down a story for me too, which is really great, and that's what it's all about, is engaging that community, getting the community going and actively getting involved in what's happening here. So let's build a better Townsville, people, and a better Australia, because let's face it, we're not just talking to Townsville today. We have been talking to all of Australia, and I didn't see some of my usual Scotland friends and other people from around the world today, but it's always good to see that little old North Queensland is going international through this channel, and there's not many other places that are doing that. And thank you, Carla. So until Sunday, stay free as best as you can, and I will have some more content for you soon. And of course, next week we've got my good Indigenous insider coming to give us some real cool truth telling, and the week after that we got Clinton Hawkes coming in to tell us about why we should vote a little bit more in the KAP way. If that's something you're interested in, definitely tune in then too. He's a great bloke, and he's does so much to help out the community where he can. Great top bloke. You should always tune in and have a listen. But until next time, stay free.